나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for being here. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I hope this podcast finds you healthy and secure. The Noble Eightfold Path. Before I dive into the Eightfold Path, let me remind all of you, assuming that you've already watched the Four Noble Truths, that as I'm going back to earlier teachings here and kind of reviewing the path of Buddhist scholarship, and we're going to do more on Nagarjuna, don't worry. I'm reintroducing these because they build on one another, and I want to be absolutely clear that for you and I, in this modern times, in this latter day, if you will, of the law of Myoho Renge Kyo, of Buddhism, of the practice of awakening the mind of Buddha, these practices of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, they no longer are effective in manifesting your Buddha. Just know that for this epoch, this time period of your capacity and your mind, these early teachings no longer provide a functional basis for your enlightenment. So why talk about them? Buddhism, like so many things in life, is a teaching that builds upon itself. And I've talked about the reasons for that, but another way of saying it is that the people of Siddhartha's day, almost 3,000 years ago, it's obvious. They didn't have postal service. They didn't have email. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have internet. They didn't have television. They didn't have radio. The way they communicated was person to person. And education was a sparsely known thing. Think of India, still to this day, as having over 125 distinct languages, number one. And number two, a strong caste system. If you were born to a shoe cobbler's family, then a shoe cobbler was all you could ever be in life. You could slip down the caste system, but you couldn't go up. So the people that were educated were those of a higher caste, either elite royalty or military or religious, like the Brahmins. They were the Brahmins, who secured the language, the languages, the grammar, the writing, the reading, the scholarship. The lower castes, they were just busy doing what they do, whatever that caste had as their opportunity. So, for those people with those minds, to hear that their minds, first of all, that they had a mind independent of their experience of life, that their minds weren't co-opted and owned by the Brahmin class who would come to them and tell them what their lot in life would be. For somebody to come out, somebody, don't forget, Shakyamuni was from a kingdom. He was the son of a king. So his caste was very high. For him to walk around the normal everyday people was shocking enough. But for him to tell all the, because you know Siddhartha or Shakyamuni, once he was known as an enlightened person, spoke his sermons, didn't write anything down. And he spoke in the common language of the people, the lower castes. He didn't use highfalutin dialogue of the elites. For him, his caste, a prince, to come to these lower caste people, speak in a language they all understood, and tell them that they had the power, that their minds were in control of their lives, that they could change the experience of their life through their minds. Ugh, this was very revolutionary. And it caused no little amount of political trouble for Shakyamuni Buddha. Many attempts were made on his life. He was a rebel. My point is, other than that, is that for those people of that day, this teaching alone was enough to completely change their experience of life. And if we look at all of the early teachings, the smaller vehicle, the Hinayana, the Tripitaka even, these teachings were so revolutionary for not just his day, but hundreds of years afterward, that the idea that they could revolutionize their lives through the power of their own minds was all that the practice could entail, until such time came as the development of human beings, the development of more free. The caste system, as I said, still exists today. That's why largely Buddhism is no longer a major religion in India. It's all Hinduism and magic, and because the caste system keeps people stupid. That's how it works. There is Buddhism in India, but it's left India several times, and largely because of this problem of governance and control, right? The elites don't like people thinking they have power over their own lives. But even as it migrates into China, we see people like Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu have to granularly reinvest themselves in these earlier texts to clear the way for people's progress of understanding what the ultimate goal of awakening the mind is. Attaining Buddhahood isn't even, that's still a magical, mystical thing. Hinayana is a far more kind of intellectual Buddhism, if you will, because its whole goal is the individual reaching a point where he or she, well, he, because women weren't, right? In Hinayana, women aren't allowed to be enlightened. They're simply not capable. So for you ladies out there, why would you practice Theravada or Tripitaka or Hinayana or Visapa or any of those early forms of Buddhism? They don't include you. Move on. You don't need to be there. We're in the latter day of the law. That's early, former day of the law. Even into the middle day of the law, 1,000 years after Buddha passed into extinction, women weren't given the grace of being enlightened. Sounds crazy to say that now, but understand that these teachings were built upon to the people's capacity of the day, of the time, of the era. And so as I move into the Noble Eightfold Path, understand that these are all from the perspective of people who are still coming to grips with the mind-body connection, the mind and experience of life connection, and all of the capacities and capabilities that that kind of enlightening affords. And so the highest form of that practice was to be a man who would be unattached. In other words, unaffected, uninfluenced by the vicissitudes of this samsaric life of constant birth and death, birth and death, birth and death. And that as an arhat or an arahant, or however, whatever language you want to pronounce it in, that level of knowledge would allow you, permit you, enable you to die finally with no further residue, no return. You could live life, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, and not reinstantiate your previous moments, garbage, attachments, influences. But even to that day, there was still this spooky idea of life after death. But that's a misnomer. That's not Buddhism. But in early teachings, that was the capacity of the people, and so a lot of the verbiage in the sutras of that time, they talk about rebirth into the Pure Land and all this, and everyone understood that to mean, especially in the West, when it came to the West, oh, when we die, because we all have eternal life and some kind of magical sauce that sends us to either to other planets or moons or clouds or whatever, that crazy thought. They read Buddhism the same way, and they said, well, when we die, we go to a pure land. Yeah, that sounds like heaven. This is the disease of cultural bias. That's not the case. When we talk about birth and death in Buddhism, we talk about moment to moment, birth and death. This moment is a new moment that carries with it influences from the previous. And as soon as this moment is experienced, it influences the next moment. So this one dies and the next one's born. That's birth and death. That's the cycle of birth and death, which is very clearly said in all of the writings as samsara. This lifespan that you and I experience as sentient beings, from our physical birth to our physical death, is samsara. And samsara contains the cycle of birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, ad nauseum. This isn't clear. Even though Buddha said it from the get-go, this wasn't understood clearly until later, much later, Mahayana teachings. And even provisional Mahayana doesn't make it abundantly clear, unless you're looking to see it, unless you have that knowledge, which we today have. We know better. And so when we read through these ancient texts, we see him pointing the finger. But as the old saying goes, if you look at a finger pointing at the moon, you'll never see the moon. You'll only see the finger. We are at an era now with our capacities to understand how the mind works and how we know every day. We wake up knowing that our mind influences the way our day goes. the way our bodies feel, the way our entire life moves. And so we understand. We understand that all these fingers that we have, even though they distract us, because we are in samsara, that when we think about it, when we chant, when we meditate, when we focus our minds on our Buddha mind of clarity, it is obvious how our minds affect, influence our experience of life, and therefore everything around that experience of life. Because we are not little solo things. Solipsism is a myth, right? You have many internal thoughts, but those thoughts, words, actions take place within a volume, not separate from it. That separation is the illusion. So our families, our friends, our workmates, the people around us are affected by the way we go through life, the way we experience this samsaric existence. Just as much as it affects us, our perception, right? So the Noble Eightfold Path is like a first stab at that idea, albeit taught to people of a much simpler time, less evolved, less capacity. In fact, to look at it the other way, all of these the eightfold, they're all behavior, ways of being, but they're about thinking about the way of being. They're about the mind. Buddhism is always about the mind, lest we forget that. And so this is about how we influence our patterns, our mind's work of perception. There's a lot here. And, it's all online. You can download it if you want to read all these specific little researches that I've done on the Noble Eightfold Path. You go to threefoldlotus.com. Go to, threefoldlotus.com/home/home.htm, and you will land on a page, or you can on threefoldlotus.com's landing page, there's a green button that says Core Study Materials. That will take you to that page. There's some 50-odd links on there of all these basic things: the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, why Daimoku, what is Gangyo, all these basic questions. I have all kinds of documents you can download. You can read them online. Some are HTML pages, so you'll have to read them online, unless you know how to print that. Some of them are lengthy, so I caution you. Not because it'll be hard for you to read, but because if you're going to print everything, it's going to be a lot of paper and ink, right? But these 8 ways of living the Noble Path are really efforts at Shakyamuni teaching people not only do their minds control their experience of life from their bodies to their environment, but there are ways of controlling, using that control to affect their lives. Not to reach enlightenment so much as the possibility of improving their lot in life and whatever enlightenment might look like to those people. It's when he gets to samadhi, right? So it starts with right view. It's kind of these, because they're about how our behaviors work, even though they're listed separately, they float within one another, kind of like the 10 worlds, right? And if you understand the 10 worlds, then the Noble Eightfold Path it's child's play. It's irrelevant to you. I mean, it's good for you to know about it, because you know that Shakyamuni was trying to teach how to use the mind and how it works in daily life, in samsara. But once you evolve to the point where you can understand the 10 worlds and the 10 worlds within the 10 worlds, you've mastered this. But for the sake of reviewing how Buddhist teachings build on one another, right view, and right away a lot of you just keyed into that word view. That means how we see and understand things. But that's because you have a very evolved capacity. And you're being distracted every moment of every day by a million different things catching your eyeballs. From Instagram to the news to television programs to comedy to what your friend's makeup looks like to how you're dressed, your mirrors. Mirrors weren't very big back then, right? They were polished metal, and if they had anything. Think about that. And I don't want to say, we take all of these things for granted. What I'm saying is, rather than feeling bad about taking things for granted, is just remind yourself the sophistication of thought that you have today compared to 3,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago. Make it relative to you, grandparents, great-grandparents. And in time, you will realize, wow, the world has changed so much in my lifetime. Just imagine how much it's changed in thousands of years. So right view is, the Eightfold practice consists of dedicated meditation on these activities of the mind. All the activities in our mind is occurring at a phenomenal and unknowable speeds, all predicated on the causal chains created since the unknowable past, now manifesting in what the Buddha names the habit energy of our continuing perceptions. That's a big, big concept, right? So right view, all of these paths identify aspects of the mind's amazing powers that we just let slip by, right? Right view came in time to explicitly include karma, the causal chains of nidana. Because whenever there is a thought, a word, or a deed, there is energy. And that energy has a tendency and condition. That is karma. We are born of those energies, so there's karma with a big K that instantiates you in the womb and joins your karma with the mother and father karma. So the three of you are interrelated. But it's not that you're born magically out of a sperm and an egg. You're there already because you are the energies that you are manifest from, combined with your mother and father. That's why you share traits. You also share, how long does it take to train a human being to live on their own? Ask any parent. Like that process ever ends. But certainly for a human being to be able to walk around and feed itself, you're at least in your teens before you can be held responsible. In some countries, when you're 13, you're an adult. In others, like our soft, easy nation here in North America, it's usually 18, sometimes 21 before we give you the responsibility of yourself. Look at any other species on the planet. That's a ridiculous amount of time. So, right view is to have consciousness, awareness of your own thoughts. What drives you? Then right resolve or intention. What do you do with those thoughts? What are you doing with them? Because you're doing it all the time, right? Your resolve or your intention, it's always within the scope of your attitude, the way you make decisions. How do you make decisions? What drives your opinions, your choices, right? Right speech. Well, certainly if you're paying attention to how you're thinking, then maybe what's coming out of your mouth needs to be observed a little bit more closely. Listen to yourself. What are you really saying? I've said it many times, laughing at myself, that sometimes things come out of my mouth that I burst out laughing at because I'm shocked by them. That's not a healthy place to be. I'm not proud of that, but I'm quick to observe, my goodness, where is that coming from? What is driving that? It's a useful tool for getting to know karma, energies that you're not necessarily fully conscious of. Right? We're human beings. We're driven by energies that we experience and others that just drive us forward, what you might call today epistemology. Fundamental truths that aren't evident all the time, although they manifest all the time. But when they are evident, we need to take note. Oh, where did that sensibility come from? Perhaps I need to spend some time getting to know that, maybe alter it, maybe quell it. And who knows how many myriad other things will shift because I've addressed that one not very life-affirming tendency. Right? Right speech. There are very strong causes we make with our mouths, right? Right conduct or action. Same rules, same applies. What brought about this behavior? Why do I keep doing that? Why does this keep happening to me? That's how we usually first encounter our conduct or actions, is by seeing how it reflects around us, because it's easy to blame. Man, these people always come up. These people are always in my life. Why do my relationships always fall apart? Why do I always meet people that? Well, guess what? They come to you because you drew them to you. You are the causal mechanism here. Your karma, your energy, your tendencies and conditions manifest your environment. So if something's happening to your life, you're experiencing it repeatedly, you must turn inward and find out how you are pulling this toward you. You don't have to know explicitly every little word or thought that brought it to you. You need to address karmically how this momentum is always taking you, or often taking you, to this kind of condition. Address that. If you chant about it, it will shift. It will change. You may not understand it A to Z or A to Z, depending on where you're from. But that's okay. If the dentist tells me I need to floss my teeth so I don't keep getting this particular cavitation that I keep experiencing, and I do it, I don't understand all the particulars of why that's going to help, and my mouth gets healthier, well, then I'll keep doing it. That's a very simple analogy, but we're talking about the mind here. Attitude, intent. That's what ultimately shifts. You find yourself saying things differently, thinking about things differently. Your karma is shifting. Your energy of understanding, of inculcating new data, and how you see it, how you perceive things, and how you address things is a shift in your momentum, right? I talk about momentum a lot. Well, conduct and action is a product of momentum, of that energy. Right livelihood, I talked about that during the Fourth Noble Truth. That's, again, conduct and action, right? But conduct and action that affects others, which is an illusion, because we know that that affectation, that influence we put out, is an internal causal energy, right? Right effort. It's like we're restating the same thing. How do you put out this energy, this momentum of your life? It includes all those things, doesn't it? 7, right mindfulness. Well, be aware. Be aware of all of these other things, these thoughts, these speeches, the attitude, the intent. What's your attitude right now? What are you going to do with it? How do you remain constantly aware? How do you catch yourself? I shouldn't be thinking that way. How do you catch your brow furrowing as you're getting angrier and angrier about something, and you go, whoa, wait a minute. Let me unfurrow that. Oh, why does that upset me so much? Rawr, 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 rawr. How does that upset me so much? That's the better question. Why, as I always say, is kind of a samsaric trap. It just keeps you in there fighting. How is it that that's happening? What is that from? How can I abate it? How can I soothe it? How can I disperse that energy? Not be so controlled by it. How do I do that? Mindfulness. Ultimately, how you do all that? Step number 8. Right samadhi, or right concentration. And for the purposes of this discussion, consideration, self-consideration. When I say be kind to yourself, this is what I'm saying. Use this mandala. Use the knowledge of all of Shakyamuni's teachings. Myoho Renge Kyo. Realign all these little signs in your brain. Your mind can do that. Your mind can rearrange this processor, this data storage, and the way that it connects data. You can rearrange it so that it works more life-affirmingly, your life affirming, and therefore the world around you affirming, rather than confrontational, destructive, negative. Don't build your armies. How can you have peace if all you do is supply the defense budget? Shift some of that allocated energy to constructive things. Amazing results will occur because life wants to continue, wants to continue being, right? We're all the product of that process. from the first instantiations of mass from energy, everything's about being. So why, oh why, do we have so many destructive thoughts that are counter to being? Not just oneself, but life in general. Right? To kill another sentient beings is one of the most abhorrent things in Buddhism. Why? Because there's nothing that's more aggressively counter to the life process than forcibly ending it. It's that simple. It's not because it's good or bad, or somebody says that's not acceptable. It's just the obvious statement, the obvious knowledge, the obvious thing. The Eightfold Noble Path. Noble because it aspires to better living, better being. Not just ourselves, but as Buddhism points out, that's an illusion. You're not an independent, unique unit of life. Life is everything, and everything follows the same rules, patterns, instantiation. Once you understand that deeply, that everything you experience with your mind is born of, from the same energetic process, the same process of life. That's an awesome realization in itself. This is where Buddhist compassion starts to grow. Oh, that's not different from me. That's not unique from me. That's just another, I'll use the analogy again. It's just another wave in the ocean. It's no less a wave than my wave is. And both of us are temporary conditions of a surface of a process that's huge. The ocean. Wow. I keep saying wow, but hard to come up with a different word. That's an amazing realization, a humbling realization. Doesn't mean you're less important. It just puts actually much more significance on your life. Because look at what you're affecting. And don't forget that it affects you too. Be sensitized to that. So you see what I'm going to do with these earlier teachings. I'm going to offer them to you as did Shakyamuni. But I know that your capacity to understand is far beyond the students of Shakyamuni's day. So I'm not going to divorce them from what we already know, that the ultimate practice to awaken our Buddha is Myoho Renge Kyo. That's ultimately what Shakyamuni got to. His ultimate teaching was the Myoho Renge Kyo, the Lotus Sutra of the wonderful law of the white lotus flower. However you want to translate it, Sadhamma Pundarika Sutram, because Nichiren was our most recent bodhisattva. He was a Japanese monk during the 13th century shogunate in Japan. And he created this mandala, which has a mixture of characters from Chinese calligraphy and kanji, Japanese, and ancient sila and other personalizations. It's really not a Japanese, strictly, tool. It's a tool of scholarship of Shakyamuni's teachings culminating in the Lotus Sutra. That is the Buddhism we practice. The Buddhism of awakening the Buddha mind. The one vehicle. This is why Namu we practice Myoho Renge Kyo. And from this knowledge, I will address these earlier teachings because they're useful. It's you know, if you've ever owned a lawnmower, it's useful to know how the carburetor works and how other things work so that when you have troubles with the lawnmower, you can easily repair, modify, whatever. More important, because I mentioned it earlier to you ladies, this is non-sexist. This is the only teaching of Shakyamuni that includes the ladies. There's no difference between you or me, men and women, or anything you define yourself as. I don't want to get into that discussion. The mind is the mind is the mind. And the mind can be trained to view this samsaric experience from a very clear, unaffected position. That is our practice of Buddhism. Attitude and intent. It's inculcated into every aspect. Right? And so thank you, Nichiren, for pointing that out. It's been there all along. But until Nichiren came along, he put an emphatic stamp on it and said, look, this is what the entire life of Shakyamuni's teachings was about. And I'm going to make you a physical object to act as a brain focuser, because we're so distracted in the latter day, this epoch, by so many thoughts racing through our minds, that using our samsaric bodies, we can use that very sense of distraction, our eyeballs and our ears and our mouths, and by invoking Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, we say it, we hear it, and we see it in the mandala. It enlivens the Gohonzon, the Buddhist wisdom, the path to enlightenment in our own minds. And gloriously we experience the Buddha mind. It may take some chanting. It may take a little time, because you have to do it with tremendous resolve. You can't just sit there smoking a cigarette and go, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Boy, this is boring. Well, yeah, it is, because that's your attitude. Your intent has to be laser focused. I want to perceive through my Buddha mind now. Make it so. Who are you talking to? Some God? No, you're talking to yourself. You're using your samsaric tools to enliven, invoke, and experience your Buddha mind. And instead of just idly arguing about it, you're using the most powerful characters, sounds, words of Shakyamuni Buddha. Myoho Renge Kyo. They're not magic words. They're simply the invocation of your Buddha. And the more conviction you have that that is what you're doing, the more you will enliven that Buddha mind. So, even in the Eightfold Path, as old as this teaching is. Which step is it? The second one, resolve or intention. It's not a new idea. Nichiren didn't invent it. Shakyamuni was talking about it from the very get-go. Get your mind right. Get your conviction of your life to be about seeing from this Buddha perspective. Anything else is caving in to habits, tendencies, and conditions that are going to lead to sufferings because they're going to be inadequate, insatiable. You're going to get in your own way. You're going to repeat the same patterns. How many times do you have to hear the flat tire going flop, 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 flop on the ground before you pull over and change that thing? Buddhism is all about the mind. And further, how to use the mind, how to give it the proper attitude and intent, resolve, to operate from a magnificent, life-affirming place. Everything works out. If you don't believe me, do it for 3 months. Morning and evening, find the time. Get yourself a mandala. It's easy now. I have links on my own website. You can get your own mandala. Set it up respectfully. Make sure you don't have football trophies or tennis trophies around it. Get your mind focused. And chant. Just try. And then keep watching these videos. Download the podcast. Study a little. The more you know about something, the more you understand something, the more meaning it has, the more usefulness it has, the more you can sink your mental teeth into it. I don't know about you, but I need a lot of that. That's why I ended up studying this. For more than 40 years, I'm still looking for materials. Is that an obstacle? Maybe. But I know that every time I sink my teeth into it, my resolve gets stronger. I revive my intention, and I have incredible moments of clarity. All right, that's enough for today. Thank you so much for listening. For you, my patrons, I can't do this without you. For those of you who are maybe not on patreon.com, but you send me donations anyway, either from time to time or regularly, you guys, this entire Sangha thanks you. You make this practice possible. So please continue to do that whenever you can. And if you can't, just know that by downloading the podcasts or watching these videos, you are doing your best effort at study, and that is growing your practice. So that's courageous, and I'm proud of all of you, every single one of you. Because doing this stuff, I mean, it's easy to read about it and talk about it, but doing it, that takes some chutzpah. I don't even know exactly what that means, so I probably shouldn't say it. But it takes a lot of conviction, doesn't it? Some energy, some dedication. But there's a payoff, I guarantee it. So keep doing it. And take care of your health. Be kind to one another. Be kind to yourselves. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. Hey, thank you for being here. Did you know there's a third way you can help support this channel? And it won't cost you a cent. Yep, if you are not able to be a patron on Patreon or use the PayPal me at .com at Sifu Sylvain because you don't have the financial fortune to help support this channel right now, you, as I say, always support this channel by watching, but you can also help us grow so that maybe one day we can get over 10,000 subscribers and YouTube will grace us with monetization. It's not a lot, but if you can make sure you're subscribed and share a video like a simple one, just go into the search criteria and type monk and you'll have a video that'll come up that's been up for years about what is a monk. It's called monk, who, how, where, something like that. That might be a great introduction to somebody who doesn't understand what a monk is to begin with. It's a tool. Use this channel as a tool to help you with your bodhisattva practice, and share a video to somebody who you think, oh, I know somebody who'll benefit from watching this. And in that way, you can help us grow. And that's a really good way to help your practice along as well. So just wanted to drop that in on you in case that's something that you might find useful. Take care of yourself again, and I'll see you soon. Bye.